So we are in Genesis chapter 1, and let me find the little doohickey here. We're in Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 19, and we've covered a lot of this last week, but I just want to kind of go back and review just a little bit. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, it says, "Then God said, 'Let there be lights in the expanse or firmament of the heavens to divide the day from night, and let them be for signs and seasons, for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth.' And it was so." And one of the things we talked about, and I think of this as maybe one of the greatest hurdles that Christians face in their faith possibly, is all the light, and especially now, all the light from all these distant stars, and especially now you've got this brand new telescope. First we had the Hubble telescope, and it was interesting because it focused on a dark patch of sky, and it took a really detailed picture, and in that dark patch of sky, where we don't see anything, it found galaxy after galaxy after galaxy, hundreds of galaxies. And now that this new James Webb telescope is going to give even more clear and defined images of things that are supposedly 40 billion light years away, something like that. Older than the universe, apparently. I don't understand how that works. The Andromeda Galaxy is 2.3 million light years away. How do we see the light from that? If the Earth is a young Earth, if God created the Earth 7,000 years ago, the way it seems to indicate in the book of Genesis, how does that light get here? And I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I have no idea. Well, that's not true. I have ideas, I've read theories, and a lot of them are really interesting. But I think that's one of the biggest things, because they look at that, you look out and you see that we see light from stars that are farther away supposedly than the Earth has been old. Even from those galaxies that they're seeing light out there so far away, they're older than supposedly the Earth, according to evolutionists, has been around. How is that possible? But again, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and the Spirit of the Lord, the Spirit of God, hovered on the face of the deep." In verse 3, it says, "And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." So one of the ways to look at this is that when God created the light, that light had to come from somewhere. Either it came from himself. Revelation 21, I think it's in verse 5. It says, 21:23, it says, "The city had no need of the sun or of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God illuminated it. The Lamb is its light." Either God was the light that happened, and I kind of discount that a little bit. Because was God not light before he said, "Let there be light"? No, he was light. He's always been light. In fact, if you look in the scriptures, light is how you describe him. Jesus is the light of the world, John 1. It says the world knew him not, but he was still the light of the world. So we've got this idea of light. Now, the other thought has to do with the idea that God created the light in transit. And I think it's either that or something we haven't figured out yet. That when God created, and we've already covered Genesis day 3, where God created the plants and stuff like that. Did he plant seeds and then wait? I don't know. When I plant seeds, radish seeds take 21 days to mature. Did you know that? If you plant a radish seed, it takes 21 days before you can get a radish. How long was it before God created? How long was it before there were fruit on the trees that God created on day 3? That day. If you go back and read it, it says, "Let them produce fruit and seed inside the fruit." He's talking about not a seedling. He's talking about a full-grown tree. In fact, when you look at the earth, and when we get to man today, which we will get to man today, did he create Adam as a baby, fresh out of the womb? No, Adam was grown, full grown, with intelligence. He could speak, he could reason, he could do all of those things. He could follow instructions. He could do everything that a full-grown human being could do. When God put him in the garden, did God plant, my father-in-law last year planted a fig tree in my garden. Have I seen any figs from it yet? No. No, and in fact, I don't know. It may be one of those things where I'm going to dig around it and fertilize and wait another year, and then if not, I'll cut it down, just like we read in Luke just the other day. But the thing is that when God planted the fruit trees in the garden and every green herb that God's going to give Adam, they were full-grown trees. They were full-grown. So when you think about that in relation to the world, God's going to create stars, and he creates our star, the sun, and the moon as the great lights. And he creates those, and the light's there. Is it too little for us to think that God created the light from the distant stars for us to see because he created it as a mature system? Bill, you have a comment?
Yeah, do you understand how God created Adam or Eve?
Do I understand that?
Yeah, how did he do it? And of course we don't. We don't understand it at all. How did he do that? We can't even begin to understand how he could do it, unlike the way it's done today, where you have a seed, two seeds, and then you've got a fetus, and you've got a birth, and we understand something about that because we can see the process, but even that is a huge mystery. So we don't understand how God created Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. But he did. And we don't understand how this whole starlight paradox, which it is, we don't understand how God could do that, but he did. And he said how he did it, and he said how long it took. And now things are after the sixth day, we're no longer in creation mode.
Right.
And we're trying to go back and figure out, how did God do this? Well, when you figure out how God made man, you might be able to figure out how God made.
And we're trying to apply uniformitarianism to it too, right? Yeah. Because we know how we know the speed of light right now. Yeah. A man named Settering is trying to study whether the speed of light has been constant all this time, and whether it's decreasing. And if you think about the laws of thermodynamics, that kind of makes sense that the speed of light would be slowing down. Or another theory I've read has to do with gravity wells and stuff like that, that time goes different where there's greater gravity. So we don't know. You're right. It's hard for us to comprehend. I love the saying that, a man can count how many seeds there are in an apple, but only God can count how many apples there are in a seed. We have no idea. One seed, God, if we plant that and it grows up, we don't know how many apples that tree is going to have. Never. But God does. Don has a comment, Gary.
If Scotty can warp time and space and travel thousands of light years in a matter of days or weeks or months, I'm sure that God can warp light to instantaneously let us see the Andromeda galaxy.
Yeah, sure. You're talking about a science fiction thing there, but you're exactly right. I mean, it's nothing for God to create light. It's nothing for God to create light in transit. If God can create this world, he can certainly do anything like that, right? He spoke this world into existence. He spoke all these things. Let's just go on real quick. Then God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth and to rule over the day and over the night and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the fourth day. So that's the fourth day. We have God creating all the celestial things, and he puts them in the expanse that we talked about from day 2. There's two parts of that expanse. The face of the expanse we're going to see in not the next verse. It's afterwards. It is on day 5. There's 2 parts of that: the face of the expanse and the greater expanse. So, what a wonderful thought. Why did God create the stars and the moon and the sun and all of that? I mean, could the earth survive without the sun? Not really. And the moon is interesting because of what it does to the seas, how it creates tides and how it creates weather, and it does all this stuff. It's just God created them to rule over the day and the night, to give us light at night. And, around here, if you have a full moon, can you see outside to walk and easily walk outside? A full moon? Well, if it's not cloudy around here, sure, you can, right? But there's another reason God created all this. Can you think of a psalm that would suggest why God created all of this? Psalm 19, right? In Psalm 19, verse 1, it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament show his handiwork." He's a master craftsman. And I don't know about you, but when I go outside at night, and I don't know how many of you ever do this, because, in the summertime when it's warm enough to go outside at night, you look up and it's still daylight. But if you go outside at night, and especially in a place that doesn't have a lot of light, and you look up and you can see the Milky Way across the expanse of the sky, and you can see all the stars and and you get a telescope out and you look out there and you see Jupiter and its 4 moons, or the rings of Saturn and all that. How does that make you feel? It makes me feel about this big. It makes me think about the majesty and the glory of God, that God created all of this stuff. That's one of the reasons that God did. He also created it for signs and seasons and all of that. I mean, God created the stars that come every month that we see in the sky, what we call the zodiac. He created those stars. He put them in patterns. He made the Big Dipper, or Ursa Major, or Ursa Minor. He made all of those. Of course, we've said, that looks like a dipper, or and then you add other stars to it. Oh, that looks like a bear, or that looks like you can Taurus. It's a triangle of stars. All these things. But God made all of those things for science. Now, does that mean that we should pay any attention to astrology? No, absolutely not, because it's not biblical. In fact, it's anti-biblical. But God put all of those things there for us, and to give light on the earth. Light is a precious thing, and God did that for us because we need light. We don't want to be in darkness. We need light. Another thing. Go ahead.
I love the idea of maybe someday being able to travel to the stars. I don't think we ever really will be able to do it.
Not unless we can bend space.
Exactly. And so really it's there for the reason you quoted out of Psalm. So we can look at it, and see, I don't even know if we needed all that to survive on this planet. No. It seemed like we could just have a solar system.
Yep.
I don't know much about that, but anyway, you've got all this, and we're so small in comparison to it, and yet God cares about us.
Right.
That's who he sent his son for. So it really just makes you think of, what God can do is just amazing, and what he cares about is us.
Yeah.
And so
we'll see that as we get down to verse 26, right?
Yeah. And what was I thinking there about that, yeah, I guess that's it for now.
No, that's I think the point that I'm trying to make is, first of all, in Psalm 19, verse 1, Romans 1, verse 20 says, "For since the creation of the world, I can't even speak today. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made." It's hard to go out. I can see in a city why cities are bad and with light pollution and all that, because you can't see the stars. Out where I live, you can see some of the stars. You go into Seattle, it's harder to see stars. But you look up at the stars and you think, this is incredible what God has done. And like I said, it should be humbling to us to think about all the stuff that God has made and made for us, so that we can look at it and give him praise, because they do declare the glory of God. So let's move on to day 5. In Genesis chapter 1, verses 20 through 23, it says, "Then God said, 'Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens,'" or the expanse of the heavens. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them and said, 'Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth.' So the evening and the morning were the 5th day." I'm going to ask you kind of a trick question now. When God created ravens, how many ravens did he create? You suppose it was just 2? When he created whales, how many whales did he create? And there's a lot of sea out there. Do you think he just created 2 whales, or 2 dolphins, or 2, name it? What did God create? Yeah. Right, and that's my point. We can't be dogmatic about it. But God, what did it say here? That God created great sea creatures according to the kind. And he told them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters of the seas. God created all this great sea life that we see out there. Like I said, whales, porpoises, dolphins, any kind of fish that you can think of. Sea urchins, shrimp, all the lobsters, and Bill Downey is, scallops, clams, lobster, all the shellfish that Downey likes. God created all of that. And he created an ecosystem for them to thrive in. Now, I imagine that he created kelp and stuff like that when he created the plants. I don't know. I think that's a logical conclusion, that when God created the plants on the dry land, that plants in the sea also came about. But God created the animals to inhabit the sea, and then he creates the birds. Now, again, here's one place where I think the New King James, and that's what this is for our visitors, this is New King James, is better than the NASB. NASB is supposed to be a much more thorough translation, a more literal translation. In verse, which is it? Where do I have it here? There it is. I've got it bolded. That's why I couldn't see it. It's in verse 20. "Let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament." The word "face" there is not in the NSB, but it is in the Hebrew. And I'm not sure why. And in fact, in the NASB, I'm not sure if it says expanse there. It might say heavens. It might say the expanse of the heavens. The expanse has a face, and that face is what we would call the atmosphere. It's the beginning. I said this last week. Don, if I look at Don's face, that's the beginning of Don. The rest of him is behind his face. And the same with the expanse. We have an expanse, and the great expanse, and the face of that expanse is our atmosphere. So again, that's just pointing that out here. So God makes the fish, he makes the birds, and he gives them the command to be fruitful and multiply and fill the seas and the air. So what a great thing. And again, God said what? That it was good. Again, God looks at his Gary. God looks at his creation. It's Bill. He says, and it's good. And not only that, he then blesses them. And it's a blessing to multiply and be fruitful. But God blesses them and say, be fruitful, multiply. He created them, not as little baby chickens, but as full-grown chickens, as full-grown whales and all that. And he says, go out and get busy. Go ahead, Bill.
So during this time, did he create mosquitoes and leeches and fleas, and I could probably go on for quite a while. Things that we don't normally think are good when they bite us. Is this a good time to bring that question up?
Well, we might bring it up a little bit. We could bring it up and
Or do you
now
wanna
let's
wait?
talk about it now.
I'm going to wait till the fall.
No, so Bill's question is, God after the fall in chapter 3, after Eve eats of the fruit, and God says to man, he says that thorns and thistles will be a problem for you. I'm not going to quote it. He's cursing, he's putting a curse on the earth, whereas there weren't weeds before. Now there are weeds. Now is dandelion, we had this discussion a little bit, is dandelion a weed? It's only a weed because it's someplace that we don't want it to be. Dandelion is good for food, it's good for medicine, it's good for a whole bunch of things. Now thorns and thistles, on the other hand, did roses have thorns before God cursed them? I doubt it. What a beautiful flower, but now it's got thorns on it. Did blackberries have thorns before God cursed it? I can't be dogmatic about that. Now your question is, we think of mosquitoes as pests, but what eats mosquitoes? Bats do. Bats are really good mosquito eaters. Birds do. All sorts of things eat mosquitoes. Possums are supposed to be good at eating things like that. Bugs and all of that. Things that we consider to be pests, possums are supposed to be really good about eating those things. So now again, we're going to get to day 6 in just a minute. What were the animals given to eat? Every green herb, right?
Mosquitoes ate
Yeah, it's
before the
yeah. Maybe
fall.
they were addicted to chlorophyll. I don't know.
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah,
They
we
didn't
don't
have
know.
Didn't have to eat people back then.
So, in answer to your question, Bill,
They do now.
were there mosquitoes? Were there mosquitoes on day 5? We can't say, right? We can assume that if there were, that they were not eating. Well, maybe they ate blood. They're not killing. Maybe they didn't carry disease then. Were there leeches? Leeches. How do they survive? They suck on things, right? They don't necessarily kill unless you're George Washington, right? And they put too many on you. But actually, I think they also bled him. So, I think you understand that you asked a rhetorical question because you don't know the answer either.
That's it.
Yeah, right. And I have my opinion too. Linda has a question.
Just really quick, everything he's done has a balance, so there's a balance to
Yep.
everything. If there's a way to live, there's a way to be fed. So
Yeah.
that's all in there.
Yeah, no, good
I'm
point.
almost
Good point.
sure.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more because day 6 it brings up an interesting question because of what it says specifically about the animals on the land. Now, was that also true of the animals in the sea? We don't know the answer to that necessarily, and we'll talk about it again in relation to Romans chapter 5. But again, I want to point out in bold there in verse 21 that how were the animals created? They were created according to their kind. And how were the birds created? They were created, or the winged bird, according to its kind. So when God created chickens, he didn't create an animal that became a chicken, or 2 animals that got together and accidentally created a chicken. He created a chicken, he created a pigeon, and those birds breed according to their kind. In fact, a lot of birds mate for life. The same thing with fish. He didn't create a bird. He didn't create a whale that suddenly became, or a porpoise that suddenly decided it was going to be a whale, or something like that. He created things according to their kind, and their kinds are immutable. They don't. For the most part, birds, as far as I know, don't interbreed. The same thing goes with fish. They don't interbreed, as far as I know. I haven't really studied that. And oftentimes they have different things that make them incompatible for breeding. So he created them according to their kind. Now, can man mess with that kind? Can Can man breed a bigger bass or a bigger, yeah, he can. He can, just like he can do with dogs. You want a big dog, you can breed a big dog. It takes generations of dogs, but you find the two strongest dogs and you breed those together, and out of their children, you find another big dog and you breed them together, and you can get bigger dogs. Just, that's how they got miniature Doberman Pinschers. By finding the small ones and breeding the small ones, and so eventually they miniaturized them, and then they breed that way. Man can manipulate it, but can a full-grown Doberman Pinscher still breed with a miniature Doberman Pinscher? Yes, they're still the same dog. They're still the same species. It's just that man has tinkered with them a little bit. That doesn't mean that they've changed their kind. So again, after its kind is important here. If you don't have any comments, we'll move on to day 6. Oh, Gary.
For a while there, you were talking about, did the light from the sun and the stars come to the earth right away?
Yeah.
How did God make this, that? I have just maybe a silly thought on this. If I go on the internet and I pick out the best lazy boy chair, the one that has the massage feature, the recline feature, it's made of the softest cloth, and it has the best cup holder, and it gets to my house, the guys unbox it for me, they plug it in, and it works. Am I really going to be sitting there wondering, how was this made? How was this cloth woven together? How was this? How was that? It was made. Whoever designed it and built it did a good job. God designed the earth, and he made it, and he did a good job. I don't quite understand, why does man care so much? God did such a good job. He takes care of us. He made the best earth possible. Just sit back and enjoy it. God made a good earth for us.
Well, that's the difference between you and me. And you might just sit down in that lazy boy and think, oh, this is the greatest thing. I might look at something and say, this is really cool. I wonder how this is made. You know, I might, not that I would take something brand new apart, but I tell you what, I've, on more than one occasion, when something is outlived its usefulness, I've taken it apart because I want to see how it's made, just for the fun of it. And I think that's why, Gary, is just that sometimes men, and sometimes in their quest to understand, they'll take things apart. You know, it's like Da Vinci. If you go back and look at Da Vinci's drawings and his paintings and stuff like that, you'll see some of the best anatomical illustrations possible. How do you suppose he did that? Because he flayed some cadavers. He took the skin off of cadavers, which was illegal at the time, to see how the muscles looked. He wanted to know what was underneath so that he could most accurately represent what a man looked like. And that's, I think that a lot of times people, they just want to know. And whereas some people are, and God bless you, some people are just, thankful for the lazy boy. I might be looking at the construction of it because one of the things I like to do is build things. I like to build things, and I might be thinking, I wonder if I could build one of these. And in fact, there are people out there who say, I can build one of these too and sell it under my name, and there are people who do that all the time. They reverse engineer stuff. Linda, since you're still there.
I was taught that it was because God wanted to be a proud dad, kind of I'm just saying that,
No,
Just-
that's a great point.
He wanted to create something really good for his children that he was going to put on there.
Yeah.
So he didn't make it, he made it the best he could make it and turned around and said, look what I did.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's what he
a
wants
great
us
point.
to do in all things.
And I've
give
made
thanks.
the point a couple of times that God is a master craftsman. And when a master craftsman sits there and builds something, and Lee and I talked about this just last week. Lee said that he worked a year and a half, I think it was a year and a half, on a logical circuit to test stress on, an airplane wing or something like that. And it was the most intense thing that he's ever done. And when he got done with it, he was proud of it, right? I mean, Bill, if you hang a door and it's just perfect, and you walk away and it does what it's supposed to do, are you proud of that? Always, yeah. If I build a bookcase and it doesn't fall apart when I put books on it, I'm excited about that bookcase. In fact, Gary, if you want later on, I've got some pictures on my phone. I'll show you all the different things that I've built lately because I'm proud of them. I want to show you. Comment in the back. So you're right. You're exactly right, Linda. I mean, not only that, but we're building up to something, right? We're building up to God's greatest creation. And what did God create these for, the fish for and the birds for? What did God create the stars for? Do you think the fish and the birds really care that much about the stars? Now, maybe some of them use the stars for homing and stuff like that. I'm sure it's probably more magnetic fields than anything. But God didn't create them. The fish don't care about the stars ruling over the heavens. Who does? Oh, yeah, it is a reminder to give thanks. Every day, every minute. Yep. Yep. Sure.
I think the concern is, when do people cross the line between building and into God's territory?
Yeah.
Talk about cloning of the sheeps, and the difference is God breathed life in the people. They got the spirit, the spirit that God gives us, and so we got so many people nowadays crossing the line, wanting to get into the territory that we shouldn't be. When you talk about building stuff, people have that, still want to go in there and create their own things. Now you've crossed that line.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting to the point of genetic manipulation and stuff like that, where they're trying to make plants that are Roundup resistant and stuff like that. And you make a great point. That you've got things, you've got mankind. The question is how far can we go towards that line? You're talking about cloning and stuff like that. At what point does man cross that line? And there are some ethical things out there that we talk about. If we're able to clone in the future, Don has a comment. But if we're able to clone a human being at some point in time, and that human being ends up having a soul and a spirit, there's an interesting theological question for you right there. I mean, if the clone is born or grown and it wakes up and it can be taught and all of that, understanding that it has a spirit, where did that spirit come from? It comes from God. So does that mean that God approves of cloning? It's a can of worms I don't really want to get into in this class, but you're right. I mean, we as humans tend to tinker when what we should be doing is maybe not tinkering. We should just be enjoying what God gave us. Don.
Besides, the mind of a clone is still its own mind, I mean, it's not exactly like, the clone, the physical clone it was made off of.
Right.
But anyway, somebody just pointed out to me that God gave man our intelligence so that we would look into things, and the more that we discover, the more it proves the existence of God.
And again, going back to Romans 1:20, right? That all of the things that we see as invisible attributes are clearly seen. And you're right, when we start looking at that sort of stuff, and Bill had an excellent class on it, but you go down and you look at the individual cells, and they're fully created little engines and cities and all of this inside a little cell, where it's got a power plant, it's got a control system, it's got locomotion, it's got all these different things in it. And you look at that and that itself has converted a lot of people who don't believe in a designer. They look at it and say, this could not have happened by chance. And that's you're exactly right, Don. that as we look into these things, and I don't think it's wrong to look into God's creation, because all it's going to do is glorify God. And I think that's a good point. Let's move on to day 6. Verse 24 and 25, it says, "Then God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth, each according to its kind." That would suggest creeping thing there, Bill, that there were crickets and centipedes and, worms and whatever you would call a creeping kind. Maybe even slugs, probably slugs, because God's intention was, when he created the biosphere of the earth, that it would be able to maintain itself. And it was so. And again, you can't underestimate that. Then God said, and it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to its kind, cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And again, according to its kind is emphasized here. This is about the 5th or 6th time that we've seen this. God is making a point when he's giving us this chapter of Genesis. He's just saying evolution is not possible. Evolution did not happen. He's saying, the scripture is saying, evolution is a farce, because everything was created according to its kind. 2 alligators didn't get together and create an egg, and out of that egg popped a chicken. Even if you believe in the hopeful monster theory, which is what that is. So you get 1 chicken. Where's the other one come from? Did 2 other alligators get together and have a chicken? How does that work? That's really hopeful monster theory. So again, according to its kind is emphasized throughout this. In fact, in these 2 verses, it's done 4 times in 2 verses. According to its kind. It says, let them happen, and it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to its kind, and cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. I'm sorry, did I miscount that? No, there are 4 of them there. According to its kind. Again, there's a book out there. If you haven't read it, it's called After Its Kind, which is what the King James Version says, after its kind. Excellent book, but the idea is that evolution did not and could not have happened. Let's go on to really the focus of chapter 1. God made the earth and the heavens and all that's in it. And he made it really for us. And Linda's right when she says that. God shows this idea of master craftsmanship, and that he made it to give it to someone. Really, when you think about it. And it's going to be clear here because he's going to give mankind dominion over everything that he's created. So God creates something. And you can think of this as a father building something for its child, and then proudly gives it to his child. And that's what's happening here, right? And God has given us the universe, really. Not only the solar system, but he's given us dominion over everything on the earth. But he built the universe for us, so that he can have a witness with us, so that the universe can show his glory. So verse 26 says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over every living thing that moves on the earth." So why did God create the world? Isaiah chapter 58, verse 18 says, "For thus says the Lord, who created the heavens, who is God, who formed the earth and made it, who established it, who did not create it in vain, who formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, and there is no other." Why did God create the stars? For us. Why did God create the earth? For us. He formed the world, Isaiah tells us, to be inhabited. He formed it as a place for us to live. And that's the whole point of this. Now, Again, when it says God here, is God singular or plural? It's plural. All throughout chapter 1, when it says, in the beginning, God, Elohim, it's plural. And when it gets here, it makes it very clear that it's plural, but then Elohim, plural, not El, but Elohim said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. So again, verse 1, you have, in the beginning, Elohim, God, created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and the Spirit of God hovered on the face of the deep. Verse 1, you have the Godhood, or God kind, however you want to say that. You have the three persons of the Godhead. And in verse 26, you have the same thing. They're getting together and they're saying, let us is also plural, make man in our image according to our likeness. So God created man in his own image, which is interesting because his is singular. But how are we created in the image of God is the real question that we want to ask here and answer in just a second. But we're created in God's image. Now, by method of exclusion, what was not created in God's image? Everything else, right? God specifically says right here, right? And so you can exclude all others because he's saying, let us create man in our image. He didn't say let us create dolphins or whales or any other creature, snails, any other creature. He did not say that. So that makes mankind different somehow, different than any other creature. Now, most creatures, do they have bodies that, do they have meat bodies like we do? Yes, they do. Do they breathe and do they grow? Do they do all this? Do they start off young and get bigger and live and convert food into waste and all this, the same things that we do? Yes, they do. So there has to be something about man that's different than animals. And what's the answer to that?
They also think.
Oh, yeah. They also think a lot of animals are intelligent. In fact, whales are intelligent. Elephants supposedly have long memories. Porpoises and dolphins, they train those animals to do things. I've seen some pretty awesome animals do things for their training. They can learn, they can think. Some of them apparently have a certain amount of vocabulary you can teach them. But what don't they have? They don't have a spirit, right? That's the way that we're like God. We have a spirit, and animals don't have a spirit. Now, it's going to say later that he's going to become a living soul. We have the breath of life in us, just like animals do. But do animals have a spirit? Apparently not. So, that movie, All Dogs Go to Heaven? Do all dogs go to heaven? I'm of the opinion, this is my opinion, that we're not going to have dogs in heaven unless God gives us, I don't think we're going to need those kind of companions in heaven or those kind of responsibilities or anything like that. Dogs don't have spirits. Cats certainly don't have spirits. They don't. You look at that, and we'll get to Genesis chapter 9 when it talks about man killing man and animal killing man and stuff like that. There's a penalty that has to be done if a man kills another man, according to God, because man is different than animals. In Genesis chapter 9, if animals had spirits, when God gives the animals to us for food, that would be wrong if animals had spirits. Because we would be killing a spiritual being. Again, God's creating us in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Now, this is, again, one take on creation. When we get to chapter 2, he's going to expand on that verse right there. Male and female, he created him. Did he create man and woman on the same day? Well, it says he did. So the events in chapter 2, when God causes a sleep to fall on Adam and he takes his rib and makes woman out of her, that happens on the 6th day. And we'll talk about that more when we get to chapter 2. But I think that's the big difference here, that when we're created, God says it 3 times here that we're created in his image. And he only made 2. Isn't that also quite possibly a difference between us and the rest of the creatures that he created? Now, I can't be dogmatic that he only created 2 whales or something. It just seems to me that wasn't his plan. And so he creates man, and he says, and he blessed them, and he says, be fruitful and multiply. Now, when did he say be fruitful and multiply? Before or after the fall? Before. Now, we know that the fall happened sometime after the 7th day. We don't know when. They might have been in the garden a year. That's what Downey thinks, I think, about a year or something like that. I don't know how you tell. It doesn't give us any type of time marker there. But when he says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, there's a necessary implication there. That procreation, like this, that sex, is not one of the things that they would have learned when they took of the fruit of the tree of knowledge and good and evil. For so long, they suggested that sex was only for procreation and that you shouldn't have sex if at all possible, that you should abstain from it and all of that. But that's not the way God created us. He didn't create us, he didn't make that act just for that thing. But procreation, the act of procreating, is not an evil thing. It's not a good or evil thing, unless you misuse it, of course. But I find it interesting that when he said, be fruitful and multiply, again, what does he do? He blesses them. It's a blessing to have children. Psalm 127, verses 1 and 2, right? Or it might be 3, that blessed is the man with I'm not going to quote it, but with many children, right? Like arrows in the quiver of a warrior. It's good to have a whole bunch of arrows in your quiver. God makes children are a blessing, and God blesses man and says, "Be fruitful and multiply." Now, when were Cain and Abel born? I don't know. Were they in the garden? I don't know. It would suggest that they're born after the garden. You have a comment, Bill?
But before the fall, there in verse 24, it says the 2 shall become one flesh. So that's before the fall. This whole plan of the sexual relationship becoming one flesh was before the fall happened.
Right, that's on day 6, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm just saying, so that
Yeah.
shows that, no, there's nothing to do with it. There's nothing corrupt or sinful about the sexual relationship.
And that's the point I'm trying to make,
Yeah.
is that oftentimes, especially Victorian type morals and stuff like that, would suggest that sex between a husband and his wife is not something that you want to do for fun, that you only do it for procreation. In fact, the high marriage ceremony would suggest that God gives marriage for procreation. That's not necessarily why God gave marriage. God gave us we do it, we need to do it in marriage, but that's not necessarily why God gave us sex. Anyway, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion. Has mankind done a good job of that? I'm not saying have stewardship. I'm saying have dominion. Is there a part of this planet that mankind has not gone to and has not in some way established his mark? And they have a base in one of the most inhospitable places in the world, in Antarctica, in the South Pole, right? Where it's like the North Pole, where it's dark half the year and stuff like that, where it's constantly, snowing and blizzards and stuff like that. And if you want, there are people who report from the South Pole, and they'll tell you all about it. But mankind has established a foothold there. Now, we haven't started living under the water yet, as far as I know, except, in submarines and stuff like that. I'm almost out of time. But mankind is given dominion over the earth, and we're supposed to have dominion over the earth. That means that we're supposed to have dominion over fish, whether it's catching them or growing them or, whatever. We're supposed to have dominion over the land animals, the birds of the air, over everything that moves on the earth. Now, it's interesting that mankind is given that, and that's just another way that we're created to be like God. What does God have dominion over? Everything. And what did he do for us? He gave us a sphere of influence. He said, you can take care of this world here. You have control of this world here. So now, again, stewardship is totally different, whether we do it in a good way or not. I work for a company that tells you that they're good stewards of the land. They grow trees, and then they cut them down. They wait about 50 years from time when they plant them until when they cut them down. But they farm trees. And it's interesting that the company I work for is also now going to be selling carbon credits to companies that don't have trees, that produce a lot of carbon and stuff like that. So Weyerhaeuser's actually, that's one of the businesses that are in where we have we're making all this fresh air, and we can trade the fresh air for money to other companies who make dirty air. And it's kind of funny, but I mean, we own the land, we own the trees, and that's one of the things we're doing. I mean, does man misuse the earth? Yes, he does. But at the same point in time, God created the earth as a very resilient thing. I personally don't think that we're going to ruin it. I think it'll bounce back from anything we throw at it. But we're given dominion over the earth. Now, I've got about 2 minutes left. Let's be fruitful and multiply. Got into that. Let's go into the next one here. And God said, see, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food, and to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, to everything that creeps on the earth, in which there is life, I have given every green herb for food. And it was so. Then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. So the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Now this is interesting.
Actually running about 10:24. I'm not sure by that clock it says.
I'm supposed to be done at 10:25, right?
Well, 10:20.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is 10 minutes to get ready.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we're done. We'll pick up here next time. But just go look and look at this and think, mankind and animals were both vegetarians when God created them. We'll talk about that and maybe the reason why for that. Thank you for your time, and I'm sorry that I ran over.